Your membership is cancelled, the manager announced, his voice sharp, rehearsed. I smiled faintly, fingers brushing my laptop. Interesting, I said, calm, measured. Hi everyone, my name is Layla, and let me introduce myself, I'm your new owner. Silence fell, thick and heavy, almost tangible. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The scent of disinfectant and polished wood seemed sharper than usual, like it noticed the shift in energy. Their eyes widened, shock, disbelief, but I stayed still, letting the moment stretch. I remembered every smirk, every subtle way they made me feel small, every glance that dismissed me as inconsequential. I had catalogued them all, quietly, methodically. And now, the balance had shifted. You, what? The assistant stammered, gripping her folder like armor. I leaned back, letting the chair creak under me. All the ignored emails, the casual insults, the little ways you made me feel invisible. Today, I reclaim my space. Today, I set things right. The manager's hand twitched near the desk, glancing nervously at the security camera. I let the silence press into their skin. My coffee steamed quietly beside me, forgotten. Outside, the faint city hum leaked through the windows. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to execute moves they never saw coming. It wasn't anger driving me. Not loud revenge. It was something quieter, deeper, a reclaiming of dignity, of space, of control. A small, sharp smile curved my lips. Shall we begin? The office had shifted before they even realized it. The air felt heavier, charged, like it was listening along with me. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting them notice my calm confidence as I opened files, typed, and glanced at screens, not revealing a thing, but suggesting I saw everything. The manager hovered, voice low. Layla, about the cancellations. I lifted a hand, quiet but firm. Not yet. Observe first. Understand later. He froze, the small tremor in his hands betraying him. The assistant fidgeted with her folder, lips pressed tight, trying to appear busy while every nerve screamed awareness. I noted the tiny tells, the way she chewed the inside of her cheek, the repeated glances at the exit, the subtle arch of an eyebrow when she thought I wasn't looking. I walked past the desk slowly, letting the sunlight streak across the floor, casting lines like invisible barriers. Perspective, I said softly, letting the word float. Everything changes when you see it differently. A minor error on a spreadsheet caught my attention, a decimal misaligned, a formula off by 1. I corrected it quietly, leaving a polite note only visible to the manager. Not a punishment. Just clarity. Already, the tension became tangible, like electricity in the air. They didn't realize it yet, but the routines they counted on were under quiet surveillance. Every habit, every misstep, every overconfidence, I catalogued it. By noon, even casual conversations slowed, measured. The subtle shifts, the hesitation, the fear of being observed, the faint nervous glances, were my allies. I returned to my desk, coffee steaming, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The first ripples were forming. Revenge didn't need noise. It didn't need anger. It worked quietly, invisibly, and by the time they understood, it would be complete. By mid-afternoon, the office felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were leaning in. I could hear whispers, half-words, nervous laughter that died before reaching ears. They were testing me, curious, cautious, unaware that the test had already begun. I leaned against my desk, arms crossed, watching. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, carving the floor into sharp lines, like a pattern I was slowly tracing over their routines. Every detail mattered. The manager's brow furrowing when he thought I wasn't looking, the assistant's slight tremor as she stacked papers, the hum of the printer misfiring in nervous rhythm. Layla, are you sure about this? The junior staff whispered, barely audible. I smiled faintly, a small curve, calm and knowing. Absolutely. Everything in this office is about control. You either understand it, or you don't. They didn't yet know, but every minor oversight, every late email, every careless glance, these were now my leverage. I observed quietly, noting patterns, behaviors, weaknesses, small cracks in confidence. At lunch, I sat alone, the cafeteria alive with chatter, but I was invisible, absorbing everything. The way they moved, how they spoke, the subtle hierarchies that existed before me, they were all there for me to read, silently, like an open book. A notification pinged on my laptop. My first subtle move had gone unnoticed, yet the ripples were spreading. They would feel it, slowly, impossibly, in ways they couldn't articulate. Returning to the office, the manager avoided my gaze. The assistant's voice wavered. Even the smallest glances betrayed unease. Power, I realized, was quieter than anger. Subtle. Relentless. And now, in the gaps they left exposed, it was mine. By the next morning, the office had changed. Even the fluorescent lights seemed sharper, the hum of the computers more tense. The manager avoided my desk, his steps cautious, measured. The assistant lingered, pretending to organize files, but her fingers betrayed her, tapping, fidgeting, twitching with unease. I opened the quarterly reports, scanning the numbers quietly. Minor errors glimmered like small beacons, nothing serious, but enough to show negligence. I corrected them, leaving a brief, polite note visible only to the manager. No accusation, no drama. Just precision. Already, the ripple of quiet authority had begun. You, Layla, the manager stammered. I looked up, calm, letting the words hang in the space between us. Listen carefully, I said softly. Everything you do from this point will be noticed. Consistency will be rewarded. Negligence, exposed. He swallowed, understanding more than he could say. The assistant's eyes flicked nervously to her screen, then to me, then away. Subtle fear, not panic, but enough for me to know my influence had taken root. I walked slowly through the office, letting sunlight stream across the floor, highlighting every desk, every corner, every subtle sign of discomfort. Perspective, I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. Everything is about seeing clearly. By afternoon, even small whispers had dwindled. The staff were cautious, deliberate, their behavior measured. Every glance over a shoulder, every double-checked email, every nervous tap on a keyboard. It all confirmed my quiet control. As I leaned back in my chair, coffee in hand, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about chaos. It wasn't about shouting or confrontation. It was about precision, patience, and subtle dominance. And now, I was in command. By the fifth day, the office no longer belonged to them. It moved when I moved. It paused when I paused. Even the air felt trained. I arrived early again. The floor was freshly cleaned, the scent of lemon polish sharp and artificial. I liked that, evidence of effort made out of fear, not pride. The assistant walked in first. She stopped when she saw me, her smile delayed by half a second too long. That pause told me everything. Morning, I said gently. Her shoulders dropped in relief that I hadn't added anything else. The manager came in next. He looked exhausted. Not tired, worn down. He'd been double-checking everything, I knew. Overcorrecting. Losing sleep. Power does that when it changes hands quietly. I opened a report during the team briefing. We'll start here, I said, tapping the screen once. This projection was approved without verification. Silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply waited. That was mine, the manager admitted. I nodded. Fixable, I said. Then I added, calmly, but only once. The assistant inhaled sharply. Someone shifted in their chair. I could feel the moment sink in, not fear, not humiliation. Awareness. Throughout the day, I noticed the changes. Emails rewritten 3 times before sending. Conversations stopping when I walked by. Laughter becoming cautious. Respect, finally learning how to behave. At lunch, I stayed at my desk. Outside, horns blared. Inside, keyboards tapped carefully, like everyone was afraid of waking something. A message pinged on my screen, confirmation of a policy change I'd scheduled weeks ago. Quiet. Legal. I smiled, just slightly. They still thought this was about the membership. They still believed the cancellation was the moment that mattered. They were wrong. That was just the door closing. What came next would change everything. By the 6th day, even the manager's once confident steps had become hesitant. He paused before entering a room, glanced at the blinds, glanced at me, as if measuring whether I would notice. I did. Every micro-expression, every twitch, every small hesitation, it all went straight into my mental ledger. The assistant hovered near her desk, pretending to sort documents, but her nervous rhythm betrayed her. Pens were lined up at perfect angles, papers stacked meticulously, coffee untouched. She was trying to prove competence, yet all it did was highlight her unease. I opened a spreadsheet, fingers gliding across the keys. Tiny corrections, decimal points, overlooked totals, inconsistent formatting, were sent quietly, only visible to them. No dramatics, no confrontation. Just precision. Each subtle adjustment forced them to pause, to double-check, to question themselves. By midday, the office had learned a new language, the language of scrutiny. Every glance, every movement, every sound carried weight. The printer jammed, and they jumped. A wrong email formatting, and they hesitated before hitting send. They were alive with tension, but not fear. Awareness. Recognition. Respect earned quietly, relentlessly. I walked past the manager's desk, slow, deliberate. Consistency, I said softly. It is everything. Without it, the smallest misstep becomes significant. He swallowed, the words settling like stones in his stomach. By afternoon, even casual chatter had stuttered into careful, measured phrases. My presence, quiet yet persistent, had changed the rhythm of the office. They were no longer in control. I was. Leaning back in my chair, coffee warm in my hands, I smiled faintly. Revenge didn't need loud declarations. It worked in the cracks, in the pauses, in the silent acknowledgement that someone had quietly claimed authority, and no one could take it back. The final pieces were almost in place. Tomorrow, it would all come together. By the 7th day, the office felt like a carefully balanced stage, and I was the only one holding the script. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause when I moved. The manager approached, hesitant. "Layla, I think we understand your expectations now," he said, voice low, careful. I looked up calmly. "Understanding is not enough," I replied softly. "Execution is what matters." One slip, one misstep, I let it hang. He flinched, the weight of silence pressing him. The assistant passed by, pretending to sort files, but her hand trembled slightly as she straightened her papers. Her eyes flicked to me, searching for approval, or perhaps mercy. Neither would come, not yet. I opened a report, sending a few subtle corrections only they could see. Minor adjustments, invisible to anyone else, yet each one unsettled them. Patterns they had relied on were now gone. Their confidence, carefully constructed, was cracking in quiet increments. By afternoon, even casual whispers had ceased. Every movement, every glance, every hesitation carried significance. They were learning, slowly and painfully, that power had changed hands. I walked to the window, watching the city glow in late sunlight. It seemed ordinary, yet ordinary no longer existed in this office. My influence had seeped into every corner. A ping on my laptop confirmed the last stage, a policy change I had quietly set in motion weeks ago. Legal, subtle, irreversible. They thought they were in control. They were not. As I leaned back in my chair, fingers interlaced, I smiled faintly. The stage was set. The final act would begin tomorrow. And when it did, it wouldn't need chaos, shouting, or cruelty. Only quiet, undeniable justice, and the full realization that I had always been in command. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived 5 minutes early. They were already seated, stiff-backed, eyes alert, nerves exposed. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Ordinary things, weighted now with consequence. The manager cleared his throat. "You wanted to discuss restructuring." I nodded, opening my laptop. The screen glowed softly, reflected in their faces. "Not restructuring," I said. "Correction." I slid the documents forward. No accusations. No raised voices. Just facts. Audit trails. Policy violations. Approved decisions that should never have passed review. Everything dated, verified, quietly undeniable. The assistant's breath caught. The manager didn't speak at all. "I didn't buy this place to punish anyone," I continued, voice steady. "I bought it because I saw potential being buried under ego and carelessness. And because some people mistake access for authority." Silence pressed in. "The memberships you cancelled," I added, meeting the manager's eyes. "They returned today. With apologies. And refunds." He nodded slowly. Defeated. Relieved. A strange mix of both. "I'm also accepting your resignation," I said gently. "Effective immediately. Not as revenge. As balance." The assistant looked up sharply. "And me?" I studied her for a moment. You stay. If you want to. But things change. Respect isn't optional anymore. She nodded. Quickly. When the room emptied, I stayed behind. Sunlight poured through the window, warm and clean. I closed my laptop and finally exhaled. They thought the story was about a cancelled membership. It never was. It was about underestimating the wrong woman in a quiet room with patience, timing, and proof. I stood, picked up my bag, and turned off the lights.